Welcome to Literary Libations with Librarians. This week we are going to be talking about books with unforgettable animals. And we have 6 of us from the Monroe County Library System ready to share our favorite animal books with you. And if you want to get your hands on these books, there's a few ways to do that. You'll see as we start talking about the books and a cover of the book will show up on screen, and then there will be a list of how you can get your hands on them. To get physical copies, hardcovers, paperbacks, audios on CD, large print, occasionally there's a book club kit. You want to go to our catalog, and the website for that is on your screen right now. And all branches of the Monroe County Library System are open for curbside service right now. So if there's a book you want, request it online, call your local branch, ask them to request it for you, and they will let you know when it's in for you, and then you can go over there and pick it up. Digital versions are also available of many of these books, and there are 3 different apps that you can look for. There's the Overdrive or Libby app. If you type in Overdrive or Libby in your app store, it should come up. And that Overdrive offers ebooks and downloadable audiobooks. Hoopla is another one. Just type in Hoopla in your app store, and it offers ebooks, audiobooks, and also movies, music, and graphic novels. And then there's also RB Digital, and RB Digital offers downloadable audiobooks and also magazines and week-long passes to Acorn TV and the great courses. And the extra special thing about Hoopla and RB Digital is that there is never a wait. If you see a title in either Hoopla or RB Digital, you can check it out and download it right then. And now let's meet the Monroe County Library System staff that are with us today. And today, as I introduce everyone, we are each going to share about an unforgettable animal in our own lives. First of all, I just want to say this is a wallaby, not a kangaroo. Wallabies are like little smaller versions of kangaroos, but I'm sure that a zoologist would tell me that there's like a bajillion other differences, but that's what I think of. I'd love to say that I have an unforgettable wallaby in my own personal life, but 1, I'm pretty sure it'd be a terrible pet, and 2, I'm not sure I've actually seen a wallaby, so I can't share that story. So my unforgettable animals were the ones that I lived with. When I was growing up, I had a schnauzer named Samson, and we got him when I was about 9 or 10, and my dad had always said, we're never gonna get a dog, we're never gonna get a dog, we're never gonna get a dog. And I stayed overnight at a friend's house, came home, and there's this schnauzer in my living room. And my parents and my brother both looked at me and said, oh, we're just dog sitting for someone. And for 2 weeks, I believed that. And then finally they told me, no, Sam's living with us. So I grew up with a schnauzer. He was super fun. He was super verbal. I don't know if all schnauzers are, but they so he was great. And then when I got married, as so many newlywed couples do, we decided it was a great idea to get a pet. And so we got Charlie from the shelter in Holton Lake where we were living. And he was a lab, they think maybe chow mix because he had a spotted tongue, but he looked like a lab. He just looked like a smaller lab because he was 60 to 70 pounds. And he had all sorts of idiosyncrasies. We lived in Holton Lake at the time and lived in a little tiny 1-bedroom house right on one of the canals there. And we thought, oh, this dog that looks like a lab is going to love being on the canal and going out to the lake. And Charlie hated water, hated it with a passion. When we try and get him out, like, we just dig in. We even tried to like get him off our pontoon boat, maybe, just, force him, he'll learn to love it. No, he was clawing, trying to get back on that boat. He hated water. He hated garbage trucks. There was something about the beep, beep, beep that freaked him out, but he loved us. And so we had him for, we think when we got him, he was a year old, and we had him for almost 15 years. So that's our Charlie. Those are my 2 unforgettable animals. And now let's start with Isabella Arnold, who is a processor at our administration building. And a processor, if you're wondering, is the person that puts all the stuff on the books to get them out into the library system. Plus, she does a ton of other stuff behind the scenes to make sure that when those books come in, they're going to the right people and checking for requests on books. So we need Isabella to make sure you all get books in your hands. So Isabella, tell us about an unforgettable animal in your life.
My unforgettable animal is my dog Toulouse. A lot of people know Toulouse. This is what Toulouse looks like. He's not here today, so I just have this painting.
Oh.
Yes, we have multiple paintings of my dog. It's fine. And he is 4 years old, and he is currently at my mom's house. And he is the best dog. He has blue eyes, and he just loves to cuddle. And he's been in multiple productions. He's been Toto in 2 Wizard of Oz shows. And he's been in Legally Blonde as Bruiser. And super great and super calm. And yeah, he's pretty magical. He loves to
has his own calendar.
He has multiple. He has lots of merchandise.
He has multiple calendars.
And his own
He's
closet.
famous.
New calendar puts out. And we have tote bags, and everybody has multiple mugs of him at their home. For like family parties, he's like the prize. So like Lucy will make like a prize table and then put a sticker on everything, or like make things with his face on it as prizes. It's great. So yeah, he's really chill. He loves to ride around in a bag or in a basket, on a bike, and yeah, he's great.
Aww. And it was Toulouse, right?
Yep, Toulouse, Etienne, Angels, Arnold. Yeah, so yeah, ta-da.
All right. And Jen McCarty is a reference librarian at Ellis. And tell us about an unforgettable, I can't say unforgettable today, an unforgettable animal in your life.
Well, I've had a lot of pets. So narrowing it down, unforgettable animal. So honorable mentions to my current animals. I love them very much. Izzy and Sirius Black, the dog. They're both Shih Tzu poodles. So I have a small, well, Sirius is not small. He's a very overweight Shih Tzu poodle. He looks like a sausage with legs, but but we love him anyway. And then we have Phoenix and Luna, our kitties. But my unforgettable animal was, I had a cat named Cleo. I got her when I was in high school, and she was a tortoiseshell cat. If you're familiar with torties, they're kind of like dark calico. So she was beautiful. She was black with these orange and brown spots. But calicos and torties in particular tend to be very feisty, kind of temperamental cats, if you're, with cats. I loved this cat. She was the sweetest cat, but she was also a little bit evil. So she hated my brother. And she would jump on top of our refrigerator and wait for him to walk by, and then she'd smack him. And she'd also, my brother's bedroom was in our basement, and when you went down the stairs, there was like a little landing, kind of like a storage area, like off to the side, and she would hide in there, and when he'd go down to his room, she'd smack him. Like, she just would beat up my brother. It was so great. And after I moved in with my wasn't my husband then, but he is now. When we moved in together, Cleo moved with me, and she was kind of an inside-outside cat because you could not contain the rage that was Cleo. And one of our neighbors was like, I'm finding a lot of dead stuff in my yard. Does Cleo know anything about that? Yes. Yeah, so she was just a feisty cat, but she was like the sweetest. If she liked you, she was the sweetest cat, and we loved her so much. I miss her. She was like my favorite pet that I've ever owned, and it just cracks me up that she just was so mean to my brother. And I mean, she didn't like scratch him, but it was like a game. Like, how can I smack Steve? And it made me really happy.
As somebody with a brother, I could see how that would bring joy into your life.
It was just entertaining, and he'd be like, "You stupid cat."
Well, at least then you knew she was on your side.
Exactly, because she never did that stuff to me. It was only to him.
Smart kitty. All right, and Marcia Langendorfer is with us, and she is a reference librarian at Bedford. And share with us about an unforgettable animal in your life.
I've had a lot of pets too, but I kind of picked this similar process. We, for some reason, had all black lab German shepherds named Duke growing up, multiple Dukes. But my parents were pretty original that way. But there was a Duke that we got when I was 4, and we had him for 14 years. So from like 4 to 18, I feel like every child needs a dog and needs to grow up with a dog. That's my endorsement there. But he was amazing. Duke just was always with us, and it was wonderful. And then when I got married, we got a lab German Shepherd that was black, and her name was Molly, and we had her for 14 years. So both Duke and Molly, amazing, perfect dogs that were wonderful. Molly passed away right after my dad did, so that was kind of sad and bittersweet as well. And now we're going with, again, I feel like Jen with honorable mention to Daisy. She's my new black lab German Shepherd that we've had since January. So high hopes that Daisy's going to be my new unforgettable pet.
She will be.
She's
Go Daisy.
She's working on it.
And we also have with us Lori Harrison, who is a reference librarian at Bedford. And tell us about your unforgettable animal.
Well, I couldn't pick just one because we have 2 dogs right now, and they are the light of our lives. So I don't know. I'm going to show a picture. They're
Aww,
and Pearl.
they're smiling.
Yes, this was during one of Pearl's birthday photo shoots where we had our friend, the pet photographer, come over and photograph them in our backyard. So Pearl is a poodle mix and Hazel is a terrier mix, and they go together like peanut butter and jelly. They're like the perfect complements to one another. Hazel's the brilliant mastermind and Pearl's the lovable sidekick. So they're just my best friends. So I just adore the heck out of them. They are so quirky and funny and loving, and they're great big sisters to our little daughter who's 11 months old. They just adore her. So Pearl is sweet and dopey and doesn't have a mean bone in her body, and Hazel is very clever, and they're hilarious together. They love to play, and we are obsessed with them. I've been trying to make them Instagram famous for years. So they both have their own Instagram accounts. Nutty Nugget and Pearl May Pupper, go look them up. So we have birthday parties for them, and we're really over the top with our dogs. So those are my 2 unforgettable animals in my life. They're wonderful.
Aw, I hope I get to meet them someday.
Oh, yes.
There's probably stuff why we can't, and of course we can't right now, but we need like dog day at the library. I don't currently have a pet because we just aren't home. It just feels unfair right now for us to have a pet, so I need to play with other people's pets. So. And finally with us this week is Mandy Draganic, and she is a cataloger at Dommy, so she makes sure when you're looking online for a particular item that it's gonna show up. And tell us about your unforgettable animal, Mandy.
That's so much to say. So I also have had way too many to be able to really pick. So I kind of went very similarly to everyone else. I went with the one that I had probably the longest. I did not have any brothers and sisters. I'm an only child. I was not spoiled. So my cat, he was black and white, and his name was Sylvester. He was kind of like my brother. I blamed him on things that he could not have possibly done. I wore him. He was like just that super chill cat. I would wear him around my neck and pretend he was my scarf. I would sing songs to him. Like when I got grounded and sent to my room, I would sing songs like how nobody loves me except my cat. And he would just sit there and look at me adoringly. And he was probably the best cat anybody could ever have. I do have to give a little shout out to our current cat, Mo Cheesy. He's the only, that's not true. He's not the only pet in our house. He's the only one that I ever see. So the others live in my daughter's room, so I don't ever even see him. But so that's pretty much what I'm going with.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for sharing your unforgettable animals in your life. And now we're going to move on to books that we've read with unforgettable animals. And who would like to get us started?
I can go first.
All right.
Bella, you
Marcia spoke first, so we'll go with Marcia.
Yeah, so I picked a couple. I book talk a lot, as I mentioned, and so I just kind of went with what I refer to as oldies but goodies. And I don't know how teachers do it, because when I book talk the same things over and over, I feel like, well, you've already read this. And I realize every time they haven't. And Mandy, when you spoke last week of like The Outsiders, you picked some classics that were required reads for us. And half of the crew here had not read those. And I thought, this is why I have to remember that not everyone has read every book I've read, but it's hard because I've talked about them so much that I, don't always put the excitement and passion in them. But I just picked a couple of very familiar ones to me. I went with Marley and Me and Dewey the Library Cat. So with Marley and Me, it has become popular because it's become a movie, but I just feel like, especially with us just talking now, it is the perfect story of like the life of a dog and the way it affects you. He gets Marley as a puppy, who is, of course, this crazy Marmaduke style, and they cannot contain him. And they have this love-hate relationship. They're going to take him to a farm. I mean, who hasn't threatened that? Like, whose dad didn't threaten that, And so, they have this horrible, like, love-hate relationship. And then, they start to get babies, and he gets a back seat, but then he also becomes the protector. And, like, to me, it's just the perfect story of like my childhood. And I don't know if I speak for everyone, but like growing up with a dog and the growing pains, and then the love and the care, and then the final stages of a dog's life. So I think Marley and Me is a great story. I think it's I loved it as a movie as well. I just thought it was I think it's a really great book that's super relatable to to a dog's life. And then with Dewey the Library Cat, I like that one. I work in a library, and I think it's super fun. Jennifer, I think you're the one who told me to read this one originally, because you read this, didn't you? Oh, maybe not. I know I read it when I was working with you. I thought that was your idea, but Dewey the Library Cat is this cat that shows up at this library, and they sort of adopt him as their, mascot. And all the patrons kind of grow to love him and come to visit with him. And a couple of things, I think it's clever, Dewey, like Dewey Decimal System in the name. And there's a couple of things that I think are really important about this book. Is one, the way that he related with the other people, the other patrons. Like there would maybe be, like perhaps a special needs child, or maybe some quiet, shy kids that weren't comfortable talking to the librarians, but they were so comfortable with Dewey. And it kind of reminds me of like our Pause to Read program that we do here at Bedford, where, well, not currently, but where we have trained dogs come in, like the leader dogs come in, and the kids can sign up for blocks of time to read books to them. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful to watch these kids interact with animals. And I really loved that connection. I think it's great that everybody became so close, and it kind of became the trademark. My vet's office had a cat that they always said was their tester to see if the dog was really, a cat person or whatever. And I just felt like everyone kind of greeted that cat, and that's exactly how Dewey was. He just became loved in the whole town. Everyone knew of him, and it was great. So I felt like these were both very good, kind of feel-good reads. One about a dog, one about a cat, and just very good books to read about animals.
And I remember Marley and Me because when Mike and I were first married, I don't know if we just traveled more then, but anytime we were in a car, I would read out loud to him. I read all the Harry Potter series to him, and then I read Marley and Me out loud. And there's 2 points in the book where I couldn't read it anymore because I was crying. And it was such a good book. And then this will date me because this was probably 15 years ago or so, but John Grogan came to, I think it was in Bowling Green. And so I had read the book to Mike, and so he's like, well, we need to go see him. So we went and got to see him, and it was in like a gymnasium. So I'm not sure who was putting it on, whether it was at the university or where. I don't remember that part, but I remember John Grogan speaking. So that's my Marley and Me story. Has everybody read Marley and Me?
Yes.
See? Yeah, not quite everyone. Oh,
Jen McCarty
or Bella.
Oh,
I know
it's so funny.
But you just said the reason I haven't read it, because I've heard other people say that it made them cry, and I actively avoid those things.
It was heartbreaking at the end.
I know who I am.
Well, just stop. Just stop. Just don't read the last chapter. Just be like, and that's just how it went on forever. I mean, yeah, that's what I believe in my heart, that's how it should work. And I haven't read Dewey, so I didn't tell you about Dewey.
No, I haven't either.
I don't know, but yeah, Dewey's really. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Someone bought it for me.
almost.
It's got a library and a cat in it.
Exactly.
So I would love to have a library cat, but there are all those things with allergies and stuff that are a concern. So, but I would love to have a library cat. All right, who would like to go next as I pass?
Can I go?
Absolutely, Lori.
Yeah. So I chose 3 different picture books because it seems to be what I'm reading most lately because I have an 11-month-old daughter. So I chose 3 different ones. So the first one is Pippa, Percival, Pancake, and Poppy, 4 Peppy Puppies. We actually own this book, and it caught our attention because of the dogs. Pippa is actually our dog Pearl's sister's name. So we keep in touch with her family that adopted her sister. So that caught our attention. But it's about 4 puppies who go on adventures. And it starts with Poppy, who goes out for a stroll. And along the way, she meets new friends, Pancake, Percival, and Pippa. They get in lots of trouble and mischief, and they even have a run-in with the cat at the end. It has a lot of cute rhymes. It's fun to read out loud. The illustrations are pretty adorable. And eventually all of the puppies find their way back home to their people, and it's just a really sweet ending. So I'd recommend it for any dog lovers, especially. I just really love all books about dogs. So that gets my stamp of approval on there. The second one was Unicorn Day, and a little backstory about how I found this one. While in quarantine, we were not only cooped up in the house, but my daughter was diagnosed with hip dysplasia, and she had to be put in a full body spica cast for the whole 3 months of quarantine. So she couldn't do anything. She would basically just sit on our laps like around the clock when she wasn't in bed asleep. So we read a lot to her, and we read all of her books over and over multiple times. So we were looking for something new, and I decided to try Hoopla, and this caught our attention because we love unicorns in our house, and the pictures are so vibrant and colorful, and it just caught my eye right away. So this one is about a bunch of unicorns having a celebration, and they are very proud of who they are, and they like to have fun and romp around. The best part of this book, I think, is when they have a mishap during a glitter fight, and they find out that one of their own is actually a horse who loved to be a unicorn. So instead of making him feel bad, they just tie his horn back on his head and embrace him for who he is, and let everybody continue to party together. And so at the end, a bunch of other animals join in, and they all have a good time. And it's about embracing your differences and having a good time while doing it. So it's just a really sweet book. And one thing I found that while I was looking for information on this book for this, the author, Diana Murray, on her website has an activity kit for kids. There's everything from birthday invitations to games and other little activities on her website. So if you're into unicorns, you can always check that out. So I thought that was a lot of fun. And then for my third book, I read Fiona the Hippo. And if that name sounds familiar, it's because she's a pretty famous hippo. She lives at the Cincinnati Zoo. She was born in 2017, and she made headlines because she was so small, and it was looking for a while like she wasn't, necessarily going to survive because she was so premature. She was only 29 pounds, I believe, when she was born, which is well below what a Nile hippo should weigh. So, but she has all these wonderful zookeepers and caretakers, and they helped her, and she rallied, and she gained legions of fans on social media because they shared her story, and it kind of went viral. So she's still very much a presence on Facebook if you follow the Cincinnati Zoo. She's so cute, so cute. So she has her own storybook, and so I was like, obviously we have to read that one. So this book is about her early life, and it really showcases her spirit. And she learns how to drink from a bottle and how to walk and eventually how to swim. And I thought that it was really cute because whenever she's faced with a challenge, it says that she wiggles her ears and says, "I've got this." She's small and mighty. So the other animals at the zoo hear of her birth and they can't wait to like play with her. And it's just a really cute book. You get to see her mom and dad in there who are also at the zoo. And I just really recommend it because she's a little bit of an underdog, and who doesn't love a cute little baby hippo? It's uplifting and sweet, and I followed her story from the beginning, so I was already familiar with her, and it was just really cute to see a storybook about her. So those are my 3 picks.
Aw, I love children's books. I love picture books. Like, it's the best day when in the morning at the library, we get a pile of boxes that we got to check everything in so that we can get all those books out to everybody. And the best is when we get new picture books. Mm-hmm. And my poor coworkers have to listen to me go, "Listen to this one. Let me read it to you. I'm going to do voices." So I love that part. And I know over at Collections, that's a pretty fun moment too, that they're all sharing the picture books with each other. So, and I love unicorns.
My boys are in a unicorn kick right now. Over during quarantine, we discovered My Little Pony. They're obsessed. I'm pretty sure that they've watched all of them at least twice at this point. Like our TV consumption has went through the roof, and it's been mostly ponies. But so then they needed books that kind of went with that. And so once again, hoopla, save the day. We ended up reading some unicorn books, and I read Unicorn Day several times because it was close enough to ponies. Unicorns, and it's great. Yeah.
Oh,
unicorns are the rage in my house right now.
Yes.
Also at my house. I'm a party of one in my unicorn love, but I can get down with that.
Brian and Harry will share with you because they're all about it.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Lori. Who would like to go next?
Bella's been itching to go.
All right. Mandy or Jen? Mandy or Jen?
I'll go.
Bella.
Mandy's going to go.
Oh, Bella?
All right.
No, Mandy can go.
Oh.
Mandy's going.
All right, I'm going. So I chose, again, a classic, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. It is the second book in the Chronicles of Narnia series, but it's often read, Jen's shaking her head.
I'm saying Chronicles of Narnia fans, this is like a big debate.
It is
the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe first, or is the Magician's Nephew first?
Right.
And I say, I go the old school way. Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, read that one first, even though chronologically it's the other way, but read Lion and the Witch and the Wardrobe
What
first.
she just said, yeah. If you don't read The Magician's Nephew, you'll be fine. Just go ahead with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So it starts off with, you're introduced to this family, and Lucy, who is the youngest girl, takes out, she's actually trying to hide from some people, and she hides in this wardrobe, even though she knows it's not a good idea. It's never a good idea to hide in a wardrobe. And she works her way to the back, and instead of the back of the wardrobe, she finds herself in this beautiful, snowy world called Narnia. And she hangs out for a while, and she meets some folks, and she comes back and says, "I'm back. Did you miss me?" And nobody even knew she was gone. And it takes a little while. Some things have to unfold before her brothers and sister are able to join her in Narnia. And they all get there, and they meet two of the first unforgettable animals, Mr. and Mrs. Beaver. Mr. and Mrs. Beaver explain to them kind of where they are and what's going on and how things work here. A little bit cryptically sometimes not cryptically at all. And there's so much that I don't even know how to explain it all for this one. There's so many wonderful bits to this book. Along the way, they end up meeting probably for me, the most unforgettable animal, and that's Aslan the lion. He is sort of like the supreme king of Narnia in a way, and he's just really, really cool. Mr. Beaver even says, describing him, one of the kids asks if he's safe. And Mr. Beaver chuckles and says, safe? No, but he's good. And it's just it's a perfect description of Aslan the Lion. The story goes on and on and on. I don't want to ruin it if you read it, because it's just, the way it unfolds is just really magical to me. I don't even know. I've read this book probably more than I've read any other book ever. And so it's hard to not say things, because I want to just say all of the things about it. As an adult now, I really enjoy the Christian themes that run throughout the book too. That's also a big debate. Was it written as an allegory? Was it not? You can go back and forth on that all day long, but it's just really a magical transportation into a whole nother world. That's all there is to it. So read it. If you haven't read it, read it.
How many of you have read at least The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe?
Me.
Yay!
Bella!
I think I have. So I kind of I remember it all, but I don't remember sitting down with the physical book. If that makes
I read the whole series like over and over again when I was a kid. I just fell in love with the magical world and the characters and just loved it. And that's also why when you see the cover that was on the screen, that's the cover of the book that I read growing up. So that's the version from like either the 70s or the 80s. And that's also the one that I own now. I purposely went out when I purchased it and purchased it in that version because that was the one that I grew up with. So
yes,
thank
I was
you.
so
That's
excited
awesome.
to see your slide and to see the original, the cover of my book. Yeah.
Yep.
I have them on my Kindle, and then I went to read them, and I started with Magician's Nephew, and I was like, oh, I'm going to keep this going. So I didn't.
Yeah, start with
That
The
one.
Lion,
Go
the Witch,
ahead
and the
and go
Wardrobe.
right to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Go back to
Because The Magician's Nephew is neat once you've read all the other books, because a lot of the characters in the other books end up coming into play. So there's a reason that in the early versions, like it's book number 5 or 6, it comes much later in the series.
Yeah.
But Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
You could think of it as a prequel of sorts, The Magician's Nephew.
Yeah.
And
You can tell that Mandy and I could probably talk about this all day.
all day long. Seriously, all day. Yep. So my next book is, it's also an older book. I don't know that it's really a classic, but it's called Dunkton Wood. It came out, I think, in like 1980 or 81. It's by William Horwood. It's not a kid's book, although I read it as a kid. It's meant for adults. It has some moments that are really kind of dark. But the story is, I think of that line in From Princess Bride where he's talking about how it has everything. This book does have everything. It has adventure, it has greed, it has a quest, it has, I don't even know, it has good versus evil, it has betrayal, but it's also like an epic love story. The animal part comes in, and that all of the characters are moles. I hesitate to say Watership Down because it's really not like Watership Down, but it's a little bit like Watership Down. And the characters are just so full and so vibrant and so amazing that you completely forget they're moles until he writes in something about their snout or their flank or something that's not human-like at all. And you're like, oh, wait, these aren't people at all. But it's the story of Rebecca and Bracken. And they meet and they fall in love instantly, but they don't realize that. And they meet, they have a moment where they just talk, they exchange a few words, and then they go their separate ways. And they're kept apart by Rebecca's really evil, mean, tyrant father, Mandrake. And there's like a whole super fantasy quest where if he doesn't get these old traditions, they called it the Great Stone. Everything is about the Great Stone, and you don't really know what the Great Stone is. It doesn't explain until much later, but there's all these ancient traditions that go along with the Great Stone, and if they don't restore those traditions, their future is destined to be bleak and just tyrannical and no good for anybody ever at all. It's a big book. It's a long book. It's probably over 700 pages, I think. And I was not for a minute bored with it as a kid. Not for a minute. It was not my Harry Potter as a kid, but it was close. I just could not read it fast enough. And it's actually the first in a series of, I think, 5 or 6 books. And believe it or not, I've never even read book 2. I own book 2. I've never even finished in the series because I don't want to leave Rebecca and Bracken behind in the end of it. And I mean, they're moles. They can't live forever. Come on. So I just am not ready still to move past that little moment in their time. So I know it's something that not a lot of people have probably read, but it really is an amazing read.
I had never even heard of this one. When you sent your titles in, I was like, oh my goodness, what is this one? And then, you go and read the blurb and I was like, oh, very interesting. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Who would like to go next? Jen or Isabella? Isabella's got her hand up. So Isabella.
So my 2 books. Well, my first one I'm going to talk about is H is for Hawk by Helen McDonald. It's so good. And I am not really, I read a lot of books. I don't read a lot of books with animals because, I can do anything, but if anything happens to an animal, I'm done. And before I read this book, I read Let's Explore Diabetes and Owls, which was like, comical essays, and I thought this was that, but it's so not that. This is a memoir of Helen McDonald, and in this memoir, she's dealing with the loss of her father, and it's kind of like a book about her grief process, and a part of that is getting a hawk, and this hawk's name is Mabel, and falconry is like a big thing in England. And so she had been studying birds and watching birds for so long. And so it's all about her training this hawk and kind of how well or how bad the training goes is also kind of corresponding to how she's dealing with her grief. And when she's really in like the depths of it, like she's not training her bird well, her bird's getting too fat, it's not coming back when she calls it because it doesn't need food. And then she kind of learns like, oh, I have to be a better person, and I have to deal with my problems and deal with my grief to make this bird the best that it can be. And it's so, the relationship is very tenuous, and you get kind of scared for her because when you want Mabel to be able to go and fly and come back, but it's a bird, and so you can't chase a bird because it's going to fly. So when she takes Mabel out to try her hunting and to, return to her arm, I held my breath the entire time reading those chapters. Because, I knew that, the book is going to go on. Like, Mabel's going to come back because there's still X amount of pages. But I was still so scared for her. And, yeah, it's just a beautiful, beautiful story about a girl and her bird and kind of how you have to deal with your grief and just kind of keep living your life and keep rebuilding your life after terrible things happen. It's just a really beautiful story. I can remember being so surprised how much I absolutely loved it. And just being so surprised that, I'm reading a book about a falcon and I like it, what? But it was really, really, really good and really surprising. That was one book I actually purchased to reread. Yeah, it was so good. And then my other book is, I always mess up the title, so I'm going to double check that I'm saying it right. But it's because it's so long. My grandmother asked me to tell you she's sorry. And it is Frederick Backman, who is my favorite author of all time. The genius who wrote A Man Called Ove or Ov or Ove. And my book I talked about last week, and The Way Back Home gets longer and longer. And what else did he write? He wrote this. He wrote Beartown and S Against You. And so this is another magical novel that he wrote set in Sweden. And it's about a little girl named Elsa. And Elsa she's a little different than everybody else. And she has this amazing relationship with her grandmother. Elsa is 7, her grandmother is 77, and at the beginning of the book, you know, the grandmother doesn't have much longer to live. And so Elsa has kind of like a difficult background. Like, she's going through a divorce of her parents. She doesn't like her dad's girlfriend. The mom's pregnant with a new brother, and she doesn't know how she feels about it. And so she's just really struggling right now, and she's being bullied, but she has her magical grandmother. And they tell stories about this magical land whenever they hang out. They have secret language, and it's just, when you first start it, you're like, what is this? Magic? This is real? But then you find out that this magical land is kind of like a metaphor. And they live in this huge building that has many apartments in it. And then you kind of start to learn through the book that all the characters in the story are actually the tenants of this building. And this grandmother has built this magical world and collected these people to live in this house. It's not that they needed a place to stay. It's that the grandmother found them and said, oh, you're staying with me now. Like, this is your home. And the magical animal in this story is the worst. The worst lives in kind of like a closet, but you don't know if it's real. You don't know if it's fake. You don't know if it's just really a dog that like nobody walks. But he's the protector. Like, he is a warrior. He's in the magical stories that they talk about, and he is this protector, and he's valiant, and he fights, and he always protects the princess, and he protects Elsa. And it was funny because I was reviewing my stories, because I read it maybe like a year or two ago. Actually, I have a picture of Toulouse sitting next to the cover. And I came across a Facebook or maybe a Twitter post that Frederick Backman did that said he has this beautiful description of the worst, that the worst loves chocolate, he loves cookies, he'll be your best friend, blah, blah, blah. And he said that he gets a letter like once or twice a month from dog lovers that are like, the worst is a dog, you can't feed dogs chocolate, that's dangerous, like, you need to retract that, like, you can't do that. And he's like, oh no, the worst is not a dog. The dog is not a worst. Like, they're two separate completely things. A worst is a worst. A dog is a dog. A worst loves chocolate. Yes, you cannot give chocolate to dogs. So it's just kind of interesting that clearly there's a cult following for the and that everybody assumes it's a giant, protective, amazing dog, but it's not really a dog, supposedly. But he protects Elsa, and it's just so beautiful, and her love for this dog. And so yeah, it's a quirky story. There's a lot that goes on, but it's just so beautiful how it just keeps unfolding, and you're learning more and more about this home and the people and their backstories. And I feel like that's what's so great about Frederick Backman. I can't speak highly enough about him. That he just really can create these so deep and complex and just like really full, rich backstories and backgrounds for all the people, and then how he connects them. Like, he must have quite the like mood board when he's writing just like strings everywhere of how they're all connected. And Elsa, I mean, she's only 7, but she's just so wise beyond her years. And just how she is constantly like, Granny, you can't smoke, it's bad for you. Like, constantly taking her cigarettes and chastising her grandmother all the time. And kind of like, she's the boss. Like, she tells you how it is. And she's so brave, and she's so awesome. I want to be her when I grow up. And yeah, so the worst is magical. He's unforgettable. So yeah, ta-da.
Well, thank you. I have to say, I didn't know what H is for Hawk was about, but I love that cover art, because I remember when that was released, and it's so strong. So now I know, and it sounds fascinating.
Yeah, I can remember when I first picked, I think I was drawn to the cover myself. I didn't know what it was about, and after reading it, I was like, has everybody read this? Everybody, like, Mom, read this now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. Like, I wish I could have had a chance to reread it before I spoke about it. But I have 4-month-old. Reading a novel in a week is not my thing anymore. I mean, I could have back in the day. But yeah, that's now on my like short list of things I'm coming back to, because it is just so beautiful. I remember how she wrote it and just kind of paralleling this life of training and living, and it's really good.
Thank you so much. And Jen, share with us your unforgettable animal books.
Okay, so the first book I want to talk about, we're going to go back. If you have been following Literary Libations with Librarians, I've already talked about this book in this series, but I'm going to do it again because it's that I just have to. So my first book is Hounded by Kevin Hearn. Yes, it sounds familiar because I have talked about it before, but the reason that I'm bringing it back is for Oberon. So Kevin, just generally the book, if you're unfamiliar, Hounded is the first book in the Iron Druid series. Atticus O'Sullivan is the main character. He is a druid. He is the last living druid. He's been alive for 2,000 years. And in this first book, he's been kind of in hiding. The old Irish gods are not a fan of him. One of them who wants to kill him has found him. He's got to decide, do I run away? Do I finally stand my ground? And, you know, whatever happens, happens. They're fantastic books, just in that right. But one of the very, very best things in these books is Atticus is really only like regular companion and friend, because he's been in hiding, is his dog, Oberon. And Oberon is an Irish wolfhound, and because he's a druid and you can do fancy things when you're a druid, he has created a connection with Oberon, and they can talk to each other. Like a mental talking. But so Oberon actually speaks English to Atticus, and they have incredible conversations. And what's also great about the Atticus and Oberon connection is it's always on. So if they're together, Oberon can be talking. And quite frequently Oberon is talking, even when he probably shouldn't. Atticus, of course, is, you know, there's some battles, there's things. And so there's times when he has to be like, you know, you need to chill, Oberon. Like, right, this is not the time. So I don't think that this quote is directly from this particular book, but I wanted to share it because I feel like it's so Oberon. In one of the books, he says, I think life is like a ham bone. If you live it right, you enjoy it, and then you bury it when you're finished. If you don't enjoy it and let it go to waste, you still have to bury it. So you might as well savor everything you can. But Oberon is full of pure little reflections. He, you know, they constantly like zing off each other. He's a really funny character, and a lot of his stuff is very, he's a dog. So like in the first book, there's a moment where Atticus comes home and he knows someone is in his house. So he says to Oberon, like, hey, you know, you're not freaking out. Who's here? Oh, it's a lady. She seems cool. How long has she been there? I think she just got here, maybe a little while. Oberon's not good with time. So like most dogs, a little while could be, you know, this lady's been here since last night. She's been here camped out in my backyard for a month. I don't know. Or Oberon will say like, gosh, you left me here forever. It's been 5 minutes, Oberon. You're cool, you know. But so Oberon he's such an incredible character because he's truly a character. To everybody else, he's just a dog. You know, most people can't hear his inner conversation with Atticus, but he really is his own character in his own right. And his relationship with Atticus is incredible. And just his snot, like his silly humor. And he's a dog. He's a big dog who's kind of a goofball. And he's just super funny. He's obsessed with pop culture. Whenever he has to get a bath, that's my next book. Atticus tells him stories, and then he becomes obsessed with the stories. So like in this book, Atticus tells him about the Huns and, you know, Mongolian raiders, and then becomes obsessed with that. Well, what did Genghis Khan drink? Did he like coffee? He probably drank tea. Yak's milk? Can you get me some of that? So Oberon is incredible, and he's definitely, I love this series anyway, but read it for Oberon because he's amazing. There also is a spin-off. I haven't read these yet, but Kevin Hearn wrote 2 books called Oberon's Meaty Mysteries, and they're novellas with Oberon as the main character. And I've read some reviews that say, okay, this could be bad, but they're actually really well reviewed. So worth checking out if you just want to know about Oberon. So my second book is actually the 6th book in a series. So if you aren't familiar, so the book is called Blood Rights. It's by Jim Butcher. This is the 6th book in the Dresden Files series. And I'm picking this one because of a certain character that comes into play in this particular book. But if you're not familiar with this series, Harry Dresden is the only, I'm trying to remember the tagline of the first book. He's the only wizard in the phone book. He's a professional wizard. And he actually is out, like, he bills himself as such. He's literally, you look up wizard for hire in the phone book and there's Harry Dresden. He's kind of like a PI that just happens to have magic skills. So as the series goes on, you know, his hijinks get more and more elaborate. And so this book, it begins with Dresden and a friend saving some temple dogs from some bad guys. So he saves these litter of puppies and delivers them to their owner, and they get home and he realizes that one of them has stowed away. So throughout the course of this book, he's got this tiny little puppy who you quickly realize is definitely more than just a regular dog. He seems to have some supernatural abilities of his own. They describe him as a temple dog. He's a temple dog puppy, which they don't really give a whole lot to. They say he's a foo dog possibly. So there's like some other mythology in there with that. This book, if you haven't read Dresden, I wouldn't necessarily recommend starting with Blood Rights because there's a lot of stuff that happens in the other books that takes you in. But this is the first time where we get this dog, and like I said, he's kind of part of it. The poor pup doesn't get a name till the end of the book. The very end of the book, Dresden realizes, okay, I guess I'm keeping this puppy. And so his friend, there's more in that, but I don't want to give anything away, says, you know, what are you going to name him? And he looks down at this little fluff ball. He's a little gray fluff ball. And says, oh, he's little, he's gray, he's quiet. Like, has anyone even heard this dog make a noise? I'm going to call him Mouse. His friend laughs. Great name for him. We'll call him Mouse. So then he looks over and his friend has went and bought dog supplies. He bought water dish and a collar and a food. Like the very end of the book, this particular book, he says, why did you buy large breed dog food? Turns out Mouse is a Tibetan Mastiff. Not a breed I'm familiar with, but I think most of us know Mastiff does not mean small. Yeah. So in future books, Mouse becomes an important character, and he's a giant beast of a dog, like 200-pound dog. So I wanted to say this one just because it's the introduction of Mouse. And I think it's so funny how you have this tiny fluff ball named Mouse. And in future books, he becomes really important. He's a protector. And he has, you know, a small group of people that he's very, very protective of. And he's like a warrior dog. He's a protector dog. And he's got his own little supernatural stuff. If you're familiar at all with Dresden or just any particular book that people love, it has its online community. People argue about Mouse. What is he really? Is he a dog that just happens to have these things? Is he got something else going on? But Mouse is a fantastic addition to the Dresden lineup. And I think it's just hilarious that there's this giant magical dog named Mouse.
That is great. I love all the books that you share because they've got such wild worlds going on, and I love that imagination, and people have written these down and are like, other people will also love my wild ideas.
What I actually really love about the Dresden Files in general, and I love this series, it's one of my favorites. Jim Butcher really wanted to write fantasy, and he was in, I believe it was in grad school, creative writing, whatever. He's doing this high fantasy and his teachers didn't love it. And so he finally decided, I don't care. I'm done. I'm going to write the biggest piece of crap that I can write. And it became the first book of the Dresden Files. So he purposely set out to write something bad. And it was the first thing that people really, really loved.
That's
So
awesome.
It's kind of sad. But I love the series. I love this. He's this sort of gritty, it's very noir. He's like a PI. He just also does magic. And, you know, the magic world is supposed to be kind of secret from, you know, us muggles. Obviously, that's not the word they use. And he's out there. He's advertising. Wizard for hire. Hey, come get me. So I love it. It's such a good series. And you get fun little things like Mouse.
Yeah. Thank you. So for my titles this week, it took me a little while because I guess I don't gravitate towards books with animals. And I don't know if that's because it seems like for so long, every book with a dog in it, the dog dies. And that's really hard. So I don't know if that's why I started avoiding animal books. But I did go through my list of if anybody else uses Goodreads. To track what you've read. I have probably like 10 years worth of books all on there. So I was able to go back and look and go, oh yeah. So my titles, the first one is Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. And I didn't read this until when I was an adult. I never saw the movie, never read the book. And then Tony came home from school when he was probably in 3rd or 4th grade and was telling me that I have to read this book. And if my son tells me that I have to read a book, I do my darndest to read the book. So I read Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. And the basic story is Mrs. Frisbee is a widowed mouse with 4 young mice that she needs to take care of. And the summer season is coming and they need to move where they're living because they're going to come through where they're at now and do some harvesting with farm machines and things like that. So they can't stay there. They need to move. But her youngest son, Timothy Mouse, is very ill. And so Mrs. Frisbee isn't sure how she's going to get her family moved, and she needs medicine for Timothy. So in the process of trying to figure out how she's going to do that, she ends up going to the Rats of Nim that also live on this farmland. And the Rats of Nim, NIM stands for the National Institute of Mental Health. And these are rats that were tested on while they lived at the National Institute of Mental Health, and the testing made them super intelligent. So now they have their own world that they have built, their furniture, and they have electricity running, and they have water running. And so Mrs. Frisbee goes to them because she figures if anybody will be able to help, it will be them. And so the main story focuses on the adventure of getting Mrs. Frisbee and her family moved safely. But there's also this underlying part to it that was much more adult than I was expecting, because the rats are having a really hard time figuring out their identity because now they're super intelligent, but they're still rats. And one of the things that comes up is this debate among the Rats of Nim whether or not they should continue living as they are, which is very comfortable, but their leader, Nicodemus, thinks that they are thieves because everything they have, the electricity, the water, the food, they have stolen from the humans on whose land they're living on. And so Nicodemus wants the rats to leave and start their own civilization. And then another part of the rats, led by Jenner, thinks that, no, this is comfortable, this is easy, this is what we do. And there's a conversation between Jenner and Nicodemus, and Jenner says, I don't believe any of that. You've got this idea stuck in your head. We've got to start from nothing and work hard and build a rat civilization. I say, why start from nothing if you can start with everything? We've already got a civilization. And Nicodemus responds, no, we haven't. We're just living on the edge of somebody else's, like fleas on a dog's back. If the dog drowns, the fleas drown too. And I just thought, like, for a kid's book, you know, like there's a lot going on there about what is our responsibility as humans? How do we contribute to our civilization? And then the other quote that I really like, they're talking with Mrs. Frisbee and the rats, And it says all these things we worried about and talked about and puzzled over, but we could not find any easy answer because there was none. There was, however, a hard answer. And I just love that because like that feels like everything in life. There's never an easy answer. There's always a hard answer that nobody likes. So that's Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. I was just sort of blown away as an adult when I read that because I had never read it as a kid, not seen the movie still, but I just thought there's a lot going on there. So that's Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. My other book is because I sort of have an obsession with PBS historical dramas and Masterpiece Theater. And one of the ones that they've been showing in the last few years is The Durrells in Corfu. And it is about a family in 1935 to 1939 that leaves England. The mom has lost her husband, I think in World War I, but I could be wrong. But they leave England and move to the island of Corfu, which is just off the coast of Greece. And this is not a rich family. They have next to nothing. They are just done with being in England. And this is the memoir of the youngest son in the Durrell family. And so after watching the PBS series, I always tend to look it up, is this based on a book? And indeed, this one is based on a book. So I went out and got it to see what's going on. And it's very funny. He's British. He's got a very dry British sense of humor. And the family, well, I'll let him describe it. I'll just read this. I have attempted to draw an accurate and unexaggerated picture of my family in the following pages. They appear as I saw them. To explain some of their more curious ways, however, I feel that I should state that at the time we were in Corfu, all of us were quite young. Larry, the eldest, was 23, Leslie was 19, Margot was 18, while I was the youngest, being of the tender and impressionable age of 10. We had never been certain of my mother's age for the simple reason she could never remember her date of birth. All I can say is that she was old enough to have 4 children. My mother also insists that I explain to everyone that she is a widow, for, as she so penetratingly observed, you never know what people might think. So it's got that very dry British sense of humor. Gerald Durrell, the youngest one, who's 10 during the time when the book takes place, is a naturalist. He loves animals. Their home on Corfu basically becomes a sanctuary for everything from glowworms to goats to various species of birds. If any of those are injured, he wants to bring them in. If it's bugs, he wants to bring in a whole bunch of them to watch how they breed. So there's a bunch of science mixed in with his crazy family. So it's a lot of family fun. It's got a lot of animal knowledge in there. So that's my other book that I thought was super fun and had some unforgettable animals in it. So those are my 2 reads. I just want to thank everybody for being here this week and sharing about your unforgettable animals and your unforgettable animal books. And next week, we are going to be talking, we're going to be talking about our guilty pleasure reads. Those books that you love, but you might not advertise to everybody that you're going home to go read whatever it might be. So next week, we will be talking about our guilty pleasure reads. So thank you to all of you for sharing, and thank you to all of you for watching. I hope you got some new books to put on your list, and hopefully you'll be able to listen next week. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.